Are you struggling to create an intentional headspace, unable to connect deeper with yourself? Come, and together let's address the elephant in the room. I'm your host, Sinead Roche, and this is the Uncomfortable Podcast. If you're visually seeing this right now, and this is not your first time watching the Uncomfortable Podcast, then you know that I'm in a different setup, and that's because I recently just moved back to Germany. Which means, new setup, new country again. I mean, even though I've, been here, also, was born here, and just a lot of new and exciting things. I just finished not my last semester, but I just finished my first semester of my master's. And so I've had this kind of month of break where I've just been traveling around. You've been seeing it perhaps like in terms of content that you've been seeing on our TikTok and our Instagram. And I've just been traveling around, seeing a lot of my friends. I've been going to the UK, to Italy, to Köln, to Frankfurt, and Berlin. And honestly, it's just been really nice to see a lot of my friends, to reconnect with a lot of people. And also, moving into my new space again, it's kind of nice because I get to set it up in the way that I want to and take more time and more effort to really make sure that this is a place where I feel safe and where, like, when I come home from work or from class, that I feel like I can just de-stress. And so it's been a lot of exciting things, but it really has been a lot for me for the past month. And sitting down right now to film this episode, I think is the perfect time, because what I'm about to talk about is something that even just yesterday I was faced with. And I think a lot of us need to be facing it more, which is this aspect of checking in with ourselves. And I'm definitely going to get into, of course, what that means, what that looks like. But I want to talk about what happened to me yesterday, and which is why I really wanted to record this episode today. And that's because yesterday, and if I'm being honest, the past month, I've felt really rushed within all of my actions. And I know I chose to travel the way that I did. I chose to basically every day, if I wasn't like in a different country or if in a different place, then I was traveling to the new place. And so it had been quite a lot. And I've felt really rushed in my actions. And it's not even just in my actions, but also in my thoughts, because as I'm moving to a new place, I've also had to, take care of a lot of administrative tasks in terms of, making sure I'm deregistered from one place, now going to the next place. Am I registered here? Do I have everything under control in that sense? Am I aware of all the my legal obligations, taxes, just a lot of small things that continue to pile up for me. And I'm someone who does make a lot of checklists, and I use Asana to help me organize everything. But recently, all of those thoughts or all of those checklists, they've just been everywhere, to the point where it's I'll have said I'm supposed to do one thing today, and then as I'm about to sit down to, for instance, file my taxes somewhere, then I immediately switch to a different task, which might be just applying to jobs. And it's because I'm jumping around mentally so much. And lastly, I also know that I'm not really in tune with myself, or haven't checked in with myself, or need to check in with myself, because I can feel it in my body. And so yesterday I had just come home from registering myself here in the new place where I live in Germany. And I was going to actually film an episode yesterday, a different one, but I felt so anxious. I felt so tense. And when I came home, really what I did is I just sat on my bed. I took a deep breath. And I was if I sit down and I actually do this episode right now, it will not be to my best of my ability. It will not be what I really want to say. And I feel because I'm already then working from a lower capacity, it'll make it even harder for me to bounce back from that. And then, that day, so yesterday, I also had an interview to go to. So I also had to have energy for that. So what I did while I was, sitting on my bed is I checked in with myself, and I was Is it really wise for me right now to record? And if I was being honest, which I was, no. So I ended up just taking a nap. And then I went to my interview yesterday, and then I had friends come over and I chilled, and I didn't punish myself for the fact that I wasn't as productive as I had hoped to be. And now this practice of checking in with myself and, understanding where I'm at, where, what needs to get done, if I'm able to like take a rest. Yes, it takes a lot of time to be able to understand when to check in with yourself, how to check in with yourself, and also allow yourself to, take the necessary actions in order to recuperate or, get back to the place that you want to be at. And so as I get into this episode today, I want you to know that this is not just something that, just because we do the behavior, it's so easy for us to continue to practice and to continue to understand why we have to do it. No, this is naturally something that feels really weird, but I think it is so necessary, especially if you want to be someone who is intentional, because checking in with yourselves, it's basically about understanding where you're at, because if you know where you're at, then you're going to know where you're at in terms of making decisions, and in terms of those decisions then aligning with what you want at that time. You're going to understand if you have the capacity to take on other like obligations, or if at that moment you maybe need time for yourself. And I believe that in your 20s, there are a lot of opportunities that are heading our way. And thank God that there are. But as much as we're supposed to say yes to the different opportunities and different experiences, I think sometimes you also need to understand where you're at and if you're going to be able to show up in the best way and in a healthy way for yourself. So that requires you, though, to understand where you are intentionally with yourself. And checking in, what that really means for me at least, is genuinely just having a conversation with yourself. And I know that sounds weird. I was just talking about this the other day with a friend, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I speak to myself. I have conversations with myself. I ask myself, how am I doing? I ask myself, am I having fun? Am I happy right now? Am I stressed? How am I emotionally right now? I sometimes, these check-ins, it's not just about our emotions, but it's also about our habits. So sometimes, especially if I'm going through, not a lot, but if I have a lot of things going on at the same time, so like work, classes, social events, gym, podcast, driving school, which this is what my life is about to look like, I sometimes just ask myself, am I feeding myself properly? I'll maybe ask myself, am I being intentional? I'll ask, am I taking care of myself? I'm going to ask myself maybe, how's my sleep going? Do I feel like I'm getting enough proper sleep? Or is that something that I've just put to the back of my mind because I thought that it's not really necessary for me to really take a look at? And I know that this is not normal, or not normal is not the right word, but maybe it's not something that is often encouraged or often talked about, because I don't think we're often told that we have to consider ourselves or take a moment for ourselves. And I think, especially if you're taught as a person to be really strong and to, take on this matter, take on these other obligations, and you feel like you have the capacity to do so, then you do so without even thinking, because that's something that just happens so automatic for you and you're just on autopilot. And I understand what that's like. I still do struggle, with checking in and even sometimes saying no to certain things. But in the long term, and not just in terms of what I want for my vision, but even what I want for myself in terms of health, it's not always in our best interest to be moving in autopilot or to be moving in the way that maybe certain people have the expectation for us to be moving. And so when you start to check in with yourself, maybe you're able to confront, what this means or how you've been operating. And maybe you're able to change how you move or what you say yes to or what decisions you make in order for yourself to live more of a sustainable and healthy lifestyle. And before I get into, everything what this looks like, understand that checking in with yourself, it's not just about living more intentional, it's about building self-awareness. It's about learning what emotions you feel at that time. It's about reducing the stress. It's about understanding the needs that you have at that time so that you can understand which ones you need to proactively meet at that time, and so that you're not neglecting yourself. And as I've mentioned just before, if you're someone who's always been taught to be strong, to help others, and no one's really checked in on you, and you're not checking in on yourself, remember, you're not just like a well-oiled machine. You also are a person, and you need to take care of yourself. And this is kind of like a small step in order to help yourself get to that type of mindset that you deserve to be taken care of. And I know that's not something that's normal for a lot of people, or at least people who I've talked to. And even for myself, it's taken a lot of time, and I'm still in the process of understanding that I deserve to be taken care of, or that my worth is not just attached to whether or not I was able to be productive that day. And I know if I tell you right now that you need to check in with yourself because you deserve to be checked in on, even if it's not from other people, but if it's just from you, like, what does that mean? It's not something, just because someone says that you deserve it doesn't mean that you're going to ever feel like that at that moment. It's not that simple. And so the way that even for me, I was able to convince myself that I deserve to have a one-on-one conversation with myself is understanding that if I view myself as a well-oiled machine who needs to be productive, then I need to understand that machines also need maintenance checks, because they need to see if something is wrong with the machine. Because if something is wrong with the machine, then the machine is not able to be as productive as it needs to be. And so even if you're someone who doesn't believe that they deserve to be checked in on just naturally, then if you believe you are this machine, understand that logically it makes sense for machines to have maintenance checks. And then logically understand that when you are doing that maintenance check and you realize, okay, the machine has a lot of wear and tear at that moment, and it needs to rest in order to be productive once again, then logically understand that rest is contributing to your performance, that is contributing to your productivity. And so in that sense, yes, maybe that's not like the level that we want to be at in terms of understanding our worth, but that way you can at least not feel guilty for the rest that you need to take, which you understand because of the maintenance check that you just did. I hope that made sense. But for me, that's kind of basically how I was able to understand that it's okay for me to check in with myself to see, if I'm doing well, how my emotions are, and I think, that's maybe the base level of starting to learn how to do this, but at least it allows you to logically understand why it is necessary for you to have this type of check-in with yourself, because again, it's not natural. It's not going to feel really natural to do it initially. And I mean, if you already feel like you don't deserve it, then at least being able to logically explain to yourself why this is a good practice to begin with will at least set you up for success in the long run, or I'm hoping it does, because, well, actually you can just look at me as living proof kind of, only because I started off with that type of mindset was I able to grow from that and consistently do these smaller check-ins with myself. And that means even yesterday, my example of taking the rest in between my registration and then going to my interview rather than being productive, I understood it was valid for me to do that. And that's because I've started off with this type of mindset, and it's kind of just like grown from there. And obviously there's other practices which we're going to get into within this podcast, where it will also attach to, helping you to understand your worth a bit more and grow into knowing that you have that worth. And this is just a small step to get you there though. But I've been talking a bit more in like the depth behind maybe why you feel like you don't need the check-in or why you don't deserve it. Let's talk about what that actually looks like. So in some sense, if you really are able to and you can have the time, maybe it means having a little solo date with yourself. But if you're someone like me, what it means to check in with yourself, or what that would look like in order to build it up as a consistent habit, is having mini check-ins, whether that be at the start of your day, during your day, at the end of your day, or after little activities that you kind of schedule in. And I say schedule in because I'm someone who does have checklists. I do have schedules to run by. And the only way that I was able to actually and thoughtfully implement this into my life so that I don't just like forget about it, because I might just brush it off and be like, who needs this anyways? I have another task that needs my attention right now, is I prioritized it and I scheduled it the same way I would prioritize any other task. So for me, that's putting it on Asana and making sure that I get to click it off by the end of the night, like do that little checklist with it. And only then because I have it in front of me the same way I have other tasks that need my full attention in front of me, am I able to be consistent with the habit. And so I did this for a while in terms of like mini ones. I wouldn't do them every single day, but I started to practice having this conversation with myself at least 3 times a week. And what I would also do, because I'm a solo date person in terms of taking myself out, but I see that more in terms of like treating myself. What I did instead though, because I'm someone who, I like growth and I like progress and I like to understand where I'm at, is I had like monthly big sit downs with myself where I would ask myself, hey, how do we feel about the month? Did we feel like we achieved what we wanted to achieve? How do we feel emotionally? Did we feel like we were properly taking care of ourselves during that time? And I kind of, I have those bigger meetings with myself and bigger check-ins with myself. And I mean, for me, that's fun. If solo dates, or if like making time for you to meditate or sit with yourself, if that's maybe in your direction, then that is something that I would also recommend. Really anything that helps you to see it and equate it with the same value that you equate other tasks or other obligations that you have. And hopefully, yes, it's a bit weird initially, to start having that conversation with yourself, but hopefully you do understand that it is a small practice that contributes to building a larger understanding for yourself, and allows you to create a intimate headspace with yourself, which, I say that in the beginning of every episode. That's like my intro, is I'm here to help you to create an intimate headspace with yourself. And that means sitting down with yourself. And I know that's really difficult because it also requires you to be honest and vulnerable with yourself. And so what I always recommend, and I also with myself, is that I practice speaking as if I'm speaking to my best friend. And the reason why I do this is because when my best friend tells me something, I'm not going to hold it against them. I don't want to judge them. This is someone who I've chosen to love and chosen to prioritize in some way. And so when I speak to myself and I'm asking myself, how am I doing? I want my best friend to feel like they can come and tell me anything. And so I really put myself in that kind of headspace that right now we're not about to judge. Right now we're not about to say, oh, but you don't get to feel weak, or you don't get to feel as if, you're about to break because you have so many other obligations. No, right now I'm talking to you as the person who I choose and elect to love. And I think once you start to see yourself and again, practice this continuously, even if it feels really weird and unnatural initially, you start to first of all, view yourself as someone who you also choose to love. You also start to give yourself more grace in that sense. You allow yourself to open up more to yourself and actually recognize, oh my gosh, maybe this is the emotion that I've been feeling for quite some time that I haven't been able to conjure up the courage to actually admit to myself. And I believe only then you really are able to, have an intimate headspace with yourself, and that then flows into your lifestyle, flows into the decisions that you make, the actions you take, and how you take care and prioritize yourself. And, you become more self-aware, again, greater alignments, you're more mindful, and you stop being just on autopilot. And as you refine how you have this conversation and this check-in with yourself, you develop this tool that you, again, can help you to continue to improve your resilience. And as we go through life, as we go through the opportunities that come towards us, as we go through the obstacles that come towards us, becoming resilient and developing coping tools and mechanisms to help us, I think that's so important. And honestly, I think that's the only way we get through it sometimes in a better way. And that's what this podcast is about in part. So hopefully that will help you to, develop that headspace with yourself, understand where you are, understand what your capacity is at that time. And eventually, as you take that feedback that you're giving yourself, you're able to make smarter decisions and have greater alignment within. And so the question that I want you guys to ask yourself today, coming to conclusion, is how am I feeling right now? You can ask yourself this right now, or right after the episode. And if you cannot describe the emotion, because I know that's so difficult sometimes, I want you to describe the sensations that you feel right now. Do you feel tense, stressed, excited, nervous? Do you feel like you've been eating properly recently? What's the vibe? That's also something that I like to ask myself a lot. Is like, what's the vibe? Guys, And with that said, take that time for yourself. See what comes back. Allow yourself to feel like you're speaking to your best friend and that your best friend is speaking to you. So it's an open space. And yes, it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel unnatural. But uncomfortable patterns not uncomfortable patterns, but patterns that are going to help us to, grow. They don't always feel nice. And it's okay. So it's okay to sit within that discomfort a bit, but know that it will pay off in the end. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Bye. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Uncomfortable Podcast. Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode on Spotify and YouTube, and go ahead and check out our TikTok and our Instagram for more content. Bye.